didn't believe in the resurrection. And I hear people gasping in disbelief behind me. Okay? And if I could have gotten up to ask the question, I couldn't, because as soon as they said who wants to get up and ask Dr. Harris questions, a big line formed. I knew I wasn't going to get in there in time. But that would have been my question. How many people in that room of 400 knew that a Catholic priest came up with the Big Bang Theory? Or that the concept of genetics that we know today was started from, I believe, a Dominican friar, George Mendel. You might have to double check that name, but Mendel is the last name, Mendel. So, this is what I'm seeing is the source you used is a man. He's probably educated in his own right. I'm not going to say he's not educated, but I think he knows very little about what goes into Christian teaching other than what he was taught in a Bible-based evangelical forum, where many of them say, "Oh yes, I believe in the Bible literally." So, very well, a lot of these quotes that he's taking from the Old Testament are being thrown around in some of these churches who don't speak for me, and I don't even regard with any kind of validity, Christianity-wise. And neither does my church, realistically. We get along. We might have ice cream socials with them, but realistically, no. They'll come out and say things like we Catholics are, even the Orthodox, are going to hell because we pray to statues and all this other garbage that really isn't true. Even though it may look that way, may seem that way, but that's not. They really just don't know much about our religion. They don't know what. They don't realize that a lot of the teachings that they have in their Christian belief that are regarding morality came from the Catholic Church. So there's a lot of ignorance there. There was a lot of lack of discernment. In this case with Daniel Florian, now that I know his blog and see who he is, I'm going to read more of him and some of these, just about all these authors that he has on his books list. I've read at least one or two things from them, or all of their stuff. I've read all of Sam Harris's stuff. I've read a good deal of Dawkins. I've read a good deal of Hitchens. I actually thought that Christopher Hitchens was the best writer, is probably the better writer out of the three major New Atheist authors that I've mentioned. And actually the best at debating the issue also. So may he rest in peace. So that being said, I want to share with you something that happened to me. This is, I'll close it because I've been speaking for almost an hour here. Last Friday, today is Friday, April 8th. So last Friday on April 1st, due to my fallen nature, I procrastinated and was late on getting my vehicle registered, so I had to go to the DMV. And obviously I didn't make an appointment, so the DMV, Department of Motor Vehicles, opened at 8 a.m. And I said, maybe if I get there 45 minutes to an hour early, I'll be in good shape. No 3-hour waits or whatever. Wrong. Turns out the day before was Cesar Chavez Day, which in the state of California is a holiday, and state offices are closed. So the people who couldn't go on Thursday came on Friday. A lot of them thought they were as smart as me, which I'm not very smart. I'm being sarcastic against myself here. And they they got there just about as early as I did, if not earlier. Some people had blankets with them, so I don't know how long before I got there, they got there. But I got there about 7:15 a.m. The line went all the way around the building. And there were probably about 100 people in front of me, literally. Well, anyway, when I showed up, so I showed up 45 minutes early, and a gentleman identified himself as a medical doctor, but he went to a place called Calvary Chapel. It's a non-denominational Christian evangelical church. It's pretty common on the West Coast, and I believe it's even has some ministries in Guam and Hawaii. Well, anyway, he ambushed everybody. He performed something called ambush preaching. These people all have to go to the V&V. They're all in line. They can't leave the line. They can't take off, so they have to listen to this guy go on and on. Most people are respectful. But then when he got to my side of the line and started his introduction again and started talking, he mentioned the soul. And somebody came out and asked the question, how do you know there's a soul to begin with? And the guy asked it about 2 times, and this preacher guy ignored him. And so finally, I was dressed just like this too. I stepped out a bit, didn't lose my spot in line, but enough to where he could see me. And I said, "Excuse me, doctor." I had to say it a few times because he wanted to have a one-way ambush preaching conversation. He didn't want to be challenged. He didn't want anybody to ask him questions. He just wanted to get out what he had to say. And I said to him, "Doctor, you just had somebody ask you a question and you're ignoring him. You need to respect these people. He has a valid question and you need to answer it." I explained to him who I was and what I was. And so he said straight out, and this is good, what he first said. He said, "I can't prove this. This is my faith. I can't prove it." Even though he just said everything that to him that was in truth in life was in the Bible, he said he could not prove the existence of a soul. Well, okay, he identified. The first thing he said, here's the problem with what he said, though. He said, "I believe that the Bible is the source of all truth, and I take it literally." But then, when somebody asked him a question about something, he said, "I can't prove it." And that's the problem with these conversations. This medical doctor had no background knowledge. I could tell just by the way he was carrying about, because I run into people who do the same exact thing in other places where people can't get away from them. They don't have a background. They don't talk about science and reason. They don't talk about philosophy. They don't talk about the philosophers. They don't give at least a reasonable explanation to back up. They assume and they presume that, number one, what they're saying is just the truth, and it doesn't matter what anyone else says. And secondly, they presume that people will just hear what they have to say, either accept it or reject it, and they hope they accept it. But the thing is, though, is that there are people out there who are skeptical, who are critically think, and they have questions, and those inconvenient questions, need to be answered. So after he said that, a little later on, the guy asked him again, "Well, can you prove to me about God?" And he kept trying to ignore him. And then I stepped out again, and I said, "Doctor, you ignored that man again. You need to respect these people. You can't just, you're not a teacher in a classroom full of 7-year-olds. Okay, why didn't you explain to him the 5 proof of God's existence as written by St. Thomas Aquinas?" And you know what he said to me? He looked at me, he said, "I'm not going to do that." And I said, "Okay, well, good luck." And I just left it at that. And so then, the bottom line is basically this. That man, I don't know if he would have agreed to what this Daniel Forian said. Okay, but unfortunately, yes, there's a lot of that out there. There's a lot of the I'm saved, you're not. I know I'm going to heaven. That's a difference between me and you. There's all this stuff that's just really unconscionable. It's nothing I ever heard throughout my whole life growing up as a Catholic. So these people don't speak for me, and they don't speak for the Catholic Church. the primary person that speaks for the Catholic Church, at least doctrinally, dogmatically, is the Pope. And then we have a treasury of documents, doctrine. We have a whole catechism that explains everything. And all this is online. So whenever the issues come up, refer to that. I would appreciate if you refer to that before anybody says, from a Christian point of view, because it's not our point of view, at least in this case, and what's being said in this email. And that reminds me of what Sam Harris said when he gave when he was giving his talk in Los Angeles. He said he debated Rick Warren, a couple of years before. And I know who Rick Warren is. I never met him. The only reason I know who he is, and I think why a lot of Americans may know who he is because he gave the benediction at President Obama's first inauguration. And he also hosted a debate several months earlier between him and John McCain in 2008, which many people who watched it felt that it was a better debate than any of the actually mainstream media officiated debates. But anyway, Rick Warren is the pastor of some evangelical church in Southern California or Christian church in Southern California. And that's all I know of him. So he does not speak for me. So for the fact that he debated Sam Harris, and Sam Harris is using Rick Warren as an example of a Christian representative that debated him, means nothing to me. That's not out of disrespect for Rick Warren. That's just that, he's not somebody that I or any Roman Catholic who has any knowledge about the Catholic faith would even, defer to for anything. And after the presentation with Dr. Harris, I asked him, I said, have you ever debated any Jesuits? And he said no. He didn't think so. And I know he hadn't, but... and I said, because you debated Rick Warren, and he doesn't, and he said, no, he doesn't. I basically told him he doesn't speak for guys like me. And I sent Dr. Harris an email asking him to debate or if he was open to debating Father Robert Spitzer, a Jesuit who's written many books on the issues. And he's www.magis, the Magis Center, MAGIS Center. If you Google Father Robert Spitzer and the Magis Center, you'll see something in there. He's here out of Southern California. But until somebody like Sam Harris debates him, I don't feel he's been challenged. And I'm not saying I don't respect a lot of what he says. Most of the arguments by these new atheists in their books are compelling. They make compelling arguments, and they make, there's a lot of people out there that would basically have to do what that guy did in front of the DMV and say, I'm not going to answer that, or I can't prove it, or, just hope that they don't run into somebody like the guy or me standing outside the DMV. And it looked, if anyone thinks that I betrayed a fellow Christian, well, no, I didn't. Because in some ways he was betraying the truth. He said, I'm here to spread the good news, but then he was talking about eternal damnation and what will happen to you if you don't believe in God. So, I mean, to a lot of people, that's not very good news, that they're going to burn in hell. But anyway, I just want to say, Carlos, I hope you get to watch all of this, and I didn't mean for it to be lengthy. I'm not used to doing any of these things, but I really felt I owed it to you to comment on this and do it in a way where you could see some of the real me rather than what I write. And I just want to wish you again a very happy birthday, belated birthday. I hope all's well with you over there in Beijing. I pray for your mom every day. I hope she's doing well with her condition, and your family I've been praying for. And I pray that we have more fruitful discussions in the future. So peace and blessings to you and to all others. Have a nice day.